Hello everybody, and thank you again for joining me today this week. There was a bit of Netflix One Piece live action news that dropped during the week, specifically a statement from Oda that came out during Luffy's birthday. We learned that the first season is going to be 8 episodes. One of the things that I really respected about this statement is Oda's honesty. In the beginning, he starts off by saying that the production initially did not flow as smoothly as he would have hoped, basically stating that sometimes he felt that there was a disconnect. He says, "It could be frustrating for both sides. We're all trying to get to the same place, so how come we're not on the same wavelength?" He also then goes on to say, "Considering my expected lifespan, I believe that this is the last chance to bring One Piece to the entire world." I read that and I was like, well, that is an incredible amount of pressure that he's holding himself under right there. Now, this could just be me, but I do not believe that that amount of pressure is helpful for anybody's mental or physical health. Because looking at the way that he's expressing himself, he's like, this is my last chance to bring One Piece to the entire world. And the thing is that One Piece is already a global phenomenon, so it's already reaching the world. I mean, maybe not the entire world, but that's just a normal part of life and being a human being. We can't reach everybody. We have limits. And the reason I'm bringing this up now is because I think that's sort of the mentality that got us to the end of Wano and how that turned out. I think a lot of us fans noticed that one of the issues by the end was that Oda was trying to do too much. You know what? I think I just realized what Luffy's secret dream is. I think Luffy's secret dream is to have a Netflix live action show that will reach the entire world. I think I've said this before, but my personal feelings about anime live action adaptations aside, I wish everybody involved in this project the best. I hope things work out, but even if they don't, it's just not the end of the world. Now, when it comes to the chapter itself, the main purpose of it was to finish up establishing the Yonko Quartet that Oda had visualized a long time ago to be the ones that would eventually get closer to the finish line as supported by this cover. Sanji defeated Queen in the anime last night with the blue fire of Ifrit Jambe. The episode featured different animation styles within the fight itself, and due to pacing reasons, there were some additional flashbacks that were not in the manga. Although I will say that I thought the one with Zeph and the Straw Hats was pretty good. Now, even though I was expecting a little bit more lightning lines, a little bit more sort of plasma-like features from Ifrit Jambe, as was hyped up in the promotional poster, I do think the episode got the job done, but I really think it's obvious that they're saving their main budget for the upcoming Looney Tunes fight, because next week is a recap of what we've already seen of Zoro versus King, which, if I'm being honest, just kind of ruins the momentum. So if they needed an extra week to work on the upcoming episodes, I think they just should have just gone on break instead. Also, to the enormous surprise of literally no one, Sabo is alive. And speaking of people not being dead, we have Chopper munching on a part of Big Mom's soul in the cover page. And I know some fans have interpreted the fact that Zeus is still around to mean that Big Mom is still alive. Sort of like a Voldemort situation where unless you destroy each and every one of the Horcruxes, Voldemort can still come back. So he doesn't really die unless you destroy each of the fragments of his soul. And people are thinking that maybe that same rule applies to Big Mom as well, which would make sense because we know that Big Mom has some pre-established history in Elbaf, some plot points that will eventually resurface there. Now, when I first saw the revolutionary vice captains all lined up at the edge, at the shore of Kamabaka Queendom, I thought to myself, oh, here we go again. You know, it's Oda creating new characters, you know, just being creative, doing what he loves to do, just introducing more and more characters. But then I was pleasantly surprised to learn that 3 out of the 4 designs of these vice captains we had already seen before. They were last seen sitting at a table in a meeting with Koala. If I'm not mistaken, I think Jidon is the only new design here. The guy that works under Karasu, who's eating the binocular or the spyglass. Which, by the way, I kind of find it interesting that he's sort of eating something that isn't meant for consumption like that. So I wonder if that's just sort of like a gag that he has going on, or if he has kind of like a devil fruit similar to Wapples. Is it pronounced Jidon, Gyron, or Juron? Because the official translation actually has a pun with his name. He has a bit of dialogue where he says, "Juron, I'll put $1 million on Sabo's return." Also, I'm guessing that Ushiano is a cow mink, because Ushi means cow in Japanese. In addition to Sabo, we also learned that Milk Girl Moda is also alive. And so One Piece fake out deaths, frustrations aside, I wonder if her and Sabo had some time to exchange stories about Ace on their way to Revolutionary HQ. We get an extended version of this flashback where we learned the reason for why Buggy didn't join Shanks, it seems, is because he was disappointed in Shanks changing his mind over not going for the One Piece immediately after Roger had passed. And he only started making his move for the One Piece after he saw the Luffy Nika Joy Boy bounty poster after Wano. So I highly suspect that just like Roger concluded that him and his crew were too early, I think it's likely that Roger ended up telling Shanks that in order to use the One Piece treasure to its full potential, he needed to wait for a special person to show up. Roger told Shanks, you need to wait until you run into a little kid that says the exact same thing I used to say. And then after you hear him say it, you give him my hat and you tell him that he has to become strong enough to challenge you near the end of the line. Now, the moment that we get here with Buggy actually left me sitting with a pretty big sense of energy after I finished reading the chapter. It was reinvigorating. I think that's the best way I can describe it. And there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, I think as of now, Yonko Buggy has the coolest looking ship in the series. I even had to examine this opinion. I was like, is this just recency bias? But I'm like, no, I don't think it is. I actually legit think that Buggy now has the coolest ship in the series. Because we lost the Polar Tang, which isn't really a ship, it's a sub. But to me, like, that was probably the coolest. And then we also lost the Victoria Punk. So both of those ships got wrecked. But then all of a sudden, Oda comes up with this clown ship with a circus tent. Like, it's a literal floating circus. Now, I'm assuming the sails are going to end up being either red or blue, given Buggy's color scheme. But I think the color they appear to be now, which is black because of the manga, is just amazing. Legends tell the tale of a clown ship that appears at dusk with black sails. The marine hunting ship of Cross Guild. The other thing here is that we know that Oda is a jokester, right? He loves to joke around. He loves humor. So the fact that he has Buggy declare that he wants to be king of the pirates, like, because of Oda's consistent narrative effort to have Buggy always fail upwards, right? I'm like thinking, like, is this serious? Like, could this legit happen? Because if it were Shanks or Blackbeard saying this, I'd be thinking like, yeah, it's very likely not going to be them. It's very likely that neither of them are going to end up sitting on the throne. But because of Oda's obsession with humor and being funny and loving the comedy in the series, like, the fact that it's Buggy saying this, I'm like, aside from Luffy, I think you could technically make the argument that Buggy has the second strongest claim to being Pirate King because of Oda not being able to let go of the Buggy gag. Now, I'm not saying that Luffy won't be Pirate King, obviously. I think Luffy will eventually become the Pirate King. But I think that what this does here is that it sort of introduces a Naruto situation where, like, I thought that Naruto was going to be the next Hokage, right? The next Hokage after Tsunade. So Tsunade was named the 5th Hokage. And so I thought, well, you know, near the end of the series, I thought, well, then Naruto will be the 6th Hokage. Surprise, surprise, Kishimoto actually has Kakashi be named Hokage before Naruto. So Kakashi becomes the 6th Hokage, and then Naruto eventually becomes the 7th. Now, I'm not saying that Buggy and Kakashi are comparable in any way, shape, or form, but I am saying that Oda can find a way of writing things to where Buggy actually ends up sitting on the throne and is named Pirate King temporarily and before Luffy. And here's how I think this could unfold. So, according to Whitebeard, during his last words, he says that once the One Piece treasure is found, it will essentially turn the world into a circus, it'll turn the world upside down and create a war that will encompass the entire world. And we're already seeing hints of that happening already with the conversation between Sengoku and Suru about the T-Bone situation. By the way, given Sengoku and Suru's reaction to Kujaku being in Hashinosu, I think it's a safe bet to say that Sengoku is also part of Kujaku's family tree, just like we know that Suru is her grandmother. I think it's pretty obvious that there is a connection there, a blood relation or familiar connection between Sengoku and Kujaku as well. And it really shouldn't come as a surprise that some civilians are choosing to go against the Marines because, on average, the Marines have done a pretty bad job at prioritizing the quality of life and well-being of civilians because they work for the government, which is corrupt. Now, there's something about the way that the official translation phrases the incident with T-Bone that kind of gets me to think that maybe that man that goes to have an audience with Buggy wasn't really the guy who killed him. So I'm a little bit suspicious about whether that guy actually did the killing or not, because the official translation says the Navy did not reveal the cause of death of T-Bone. And then Sengoku asks Suru how we found the killer, and Suru says, we have no leads. And so I'm like, really? The Marines have no leads on this random guy that was living in poverty not too long ago? That just seems kind of strange to me. It seems like there's definitely somebody else involved in this. And especially if you look at the man's behavior with Buggy's men, when Buggy's men kind of get close to him and they're like, oh, you're a pirate now. He seems kind of intimidated by them. So I'm like, you know, this guy, if he really killed T-Bone, why is he intimidated by these guys that, you know, for all intents and purposes, are fodder.
Use your feelings, Anakin. Something is out of place.
Now, even though this friction between civilians and the Marines was escalated by Buggy, it wasn't necessarily caused by Buggy. The violence against the Marines is just a symptom of a bigger problem, which is the lack of resources. The fact that we have people starving and they don't know what to do for money. That's the main issue. And narratively speaking, the only one that can actually solve it in the story, because he's the main character, is Luffy. As he tells Kaido, who also experienced living in the brink of starvation, Luffy tells him that he wants to create a world where people can eat as they please. And so with that in mind, going back to Whitebeard's speech about how once the One Piece treasure is found, it will start a war, Luffy will have to be the leader in that, right? He'll have to oppose the government, which also means taking on some of the Marines. And we also know that Luffy has a greater secret dream that goes beyond becoming Pirate King, right? He wants to do something else in addition to becoming the Pirate King. So with that said, if we go back to Whitebeard's speech about how somebody will show up that will be carrying hundreds of years of history on their shoulders and will challenge the entire world to a fight, that's Luffy. At the same time, though, based off of what we learned from Roger's life, we know that if a person gets to Laugh Tale and finds the treasure, they get declared the Pirate King. So I can definitely see a scenario where Luffy and the Straw Hats, they find the treasure, find the One Piece, they learn the truth about what happened during the Void Century. And then because it's Luffy, Luffy will say something like, until I address this, until I take care of this, this dark history that we're sitting on right now, don't call me the Pirate King. Because it's not like Luffy's going to go to Laugh Tale, find out the dark secrets of the past and just say, oh wow, this is really messed up. By the way, I'm the Pirate King. No, I think that he'll probably say something like, we need to challenge this. We need to do something about this so that it doesn't happen again. Because otherwise, if we don't challenge the government, if we don't challenge this tyranny, then I won't feel free. And the Pirate King to Luffy is the person who's the most free in the world. So I think that he'll do that and he'll say, okay, I have to challenge the government. I also have this other dream that I want to, accomplish. In the meantime, Buggy, you can sit on the throne. Because think about it. Buggy is already an emperor who in theory, like the Yonko, are the people that are closest to the One Piece. So there's that. He's also a pirate who's currently antagonizing the Marines. He's polarizing people to choose a side between pirates and Marines. He also has a pretty strong support base, which Luffy can use if Buggy decides to pledge his support to Luffy in exchange for the temporary Pirate King title. And then because of Shanks foreshadowing it during the Oden flashback, we know that Buggy will be reaching Laugh Tale. Plus, I think that Buggy being declared King of the Pirates before Luffy would actually work best for the government from a propaganda standpoint. Because if you remember, after Wano, the Gorosei were really upset about Luffy's bounty picture. They were like, I told you to change the picture. Like, why is that picture published? So Buggy being made the Pirate King temporarily even makes sense from the government side of things, of them wanting to hide the truth and cover things up. Because if Luffy and Buggy are the final two Yonko standing, and it turns out that Luffy is the one who finds the One Piece, then just based off of a very basic propaganda-related necessity, the government might find themselves in a situation where they're like, okay, we can't hide the fact that somebody has reached Laugh Tale anymore. We can't hide the fact that the treasure has been found, but we can at least say that the government recognizes the clown as the person who did these things to draw away some attention from Joy Boy. And so now that we've established that Yonko Buggy will be more than likely sitting on the throne before Luffy, he still needs to find a way of getting there. Because unlike the other Yonko, as far as we know, Buggy doesn't have any road poneglyphs yet. And then just based off of what Mihawk says here, he doesn't seem too keen on picking fights with the other Yonko on Buggy's behalf. Which we already knew. We knew that Mihawk is a chill guy that just kind of wants to be left alone. He said no to fighting Shanks in Marineford, and Blackbeard has been a Yonko for a while now, so if he really wanted to, he would have picked a fight with him already. So if he's already said no to fighting these guys out of his own volition, out of his own free will, then he's definitely not going to be fighting them for a clown. And the official translation actually makes this make even more sense, because in it, Mihawk just says, red hair, Blackbeard, Straw Hat, you want us to fight all of them at once? That's 3 Yonko in one go. Like, who would do that? Like, I don't even think there's anybody in the series that can go up against 3 Yonko at once and be successful. Like, even from an imaginary perspective, that wouldn't make any sense. Because let's say that a world did exist where one guy, one Yonko, could fight the other 3 in one go. then if that were the case, there would be no need for a Yonko system to exist. Because if there was one guy, one dude that was so high above the other three that he could 3v1 the other three and win, it would defeat the purpose of there being a Yonko system in the first place. Not to mention, the government would try to fold this guy immediately. And so the question is then, how can Buggy get to Laugh Tale without having to fight and take the road poneglyphs from the other pirates? And so this is where Captain John's treasure could come in, because it's the plot device that hasn't really paid off in the story yet. It's basically a Chekhov's gun, right? Which in Writing 101, it's the basic rule that says that if in Act 1 you have a pistol hanging on the wall, then it must fire in the last act. That object needs to be used for something, otherwise why introduce it in the first place? And so the treasure is actually something that Buggy has been looking for ever since this volume right here, which again features the current 4 emperors. So if you want to take this as foreshadowing, it's a pretty top tier example. In chapter 233, we find that Buggy has gone to an island that looks a lot like Hashinosu because it's shaped like a skull, and he believes that that's where Captain John's treasure was left, but he doesn't find anything, so it turns out that that was the wrong island. And it's not until Thriller Bark that we learn that Captain John's corpse, just like Ryuma's corpse, has been reanimated by Moria and turned into a shadow zombie. And there's 2 reasons for why we know that Captain John's treasure has to be something very significant. The first one is because we know that he was a former member of the Rocks Pirates, and we know that Sebek was interested in uncovering and researching the taboo/forbidden subjects of the world. And the second reason is because according to an SBS found in volume 49, Oda revealed that the reason for why Captain John has many stab wounds and still has 2 swords stuck to his stomach is because he tried to keep the treasure for himself, and his own crew killed him. So the treasure was so important to him that he refused to share it with his crew. Now the map that leads to the treasure is actually a glass armband that Luffy finds in Thriller Bark. And what's interesting about that is that the reason why Luffy is able to claim it and keep it is because Nami gives it to him because it doesn't look very valuable. She basically says, yeah, it doesn't seem like it has any jewels or gems, so you can keep it. And Luffy just takes it because he thinks it looks cool. So that's a pretty big theme in One Piece, how not all that glitters is gold, how there are more important things in life aside from gold, money, and treasure. And sort of on the same note, Buggy asks for the armband in exchange for helping Luffy get to Ace because he knows what it is. And Luffy says like, yeah, you can take it, because saving Ace is actually more important to me than this treasure map. And so if Captain John's treasure is in fact something that leads to Laugh Tale, let's say that the treasure has some road poneglyph rubbings, right? The fact that Luffy gave the map away is such a typical Luffy thing to do, because he doesn't care about getting to Laugh Tale first, he cares about the adventure. I mean, he wants to get there, but he wants to get there the right way, which is enjoying the journey. Because the last thing he wants is for his life story to be boring. And so this goes along perfectly with One Piece movie Stampede, where Luffy literally has the eternal log pose to Laugh Tale. He has the map to the One Piece right there. He's holding it in his hand, and he decides to destroy it. And going back to Buggy, I really enjoyed this brief leap in confidence that he gets. And maybe it was always in him, but the fact that he starts speaking over Crocodile and Mihawk, and he's like, let's go get it, even though he's beaten up, like he just literally got demolished, and he's saying these inspirational things. Like, Buggy is the epitome. He is the perfect example of fake it till you make it. And so for anybody out there who's currently feeling discouraged, I'm going to use this as a springboard here and say that one of the reasons for why this story resonates with a lot of people is because it has some truth to it. And so the point here is that if a clown with no haki can make it this far in the game, think about that. Buggy is the only Yonko without any type of haki. So if a haki-less clown can make it this far, I promise you that so can you. And I know some of you might be already thinking something along the lines of, well, even though Buggy doesn't have haki, he does have a devil fruit power. And to that I would say, yeah, a devil fruit that he ate by accident, which by the way, almost caused him to drown seconds later. And so again, the lesson that I got reminded of here with Buggy is to just keep going and to fake it till you make it, because even though life is unpredictable, that's not just the bad news, it's also the good news as well. And that is going to do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching and for all of your support. If you would like to, you can follow me on Instagram at Team7Mage, and let me know what you thought about the points that I raised in this video down below in the comments section. Thanks again, take care, we'll catch you guys later. Bye.